Tyler Glasnow was not supposed to speak. That was the understanding. That was the unwritten rule inside a clubhouse that had learned, over a long and painful season, that certain conversations stay behind certain doors. You process it internally. You trust the organization. You say the right things in front of the microphone and save the real words for the people who were actually in the room with you. Glasnow broke that understanding. He didn't break it loudly. He didn't flip a table or storm out of a press conference or say something that would end up as a headline for the wrong reasons. He broke it the way a man breaks something when he has simply run out of the patience required to keep it intact. Quietly. Deliberately. With the kind of controlled intensity that is somehow more unsettling than pure anger. "I've earned my spot," he said. "Everyone in this building knows I've earned my spot." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The room already knew what he meant. It started the way these things always start in Los Angeles. Not with a dramatic announcement. Not with a press release sent at a convenient hour when the news cycle was already crowded. It started with a meeting. A closed-door conversation inside Dodger Stadium that lasted long enough for the people waiting outside to understand that whatever was happening in there was not routine. And when Dave Roberts walked out of that room and stood in front of his coaching staff with a list in his hand, the expression on his face was not the expression of a man who had just made a comfortable decision. It was the expression of a man who had made the right decision. Those are not always the same thing. The announcement came shortly after. 13 pitchers. The 13 strongest arms in the Dodgers organization, Roberts said. The best rotation, the best bullpen configuration, the most complete pitching staff he had ever had the privilege of managing. He said it without hesitation. He said it without qualification. And then he said the part that changed everything. 2 pitchers were being demoted. The names landed differently depending on who was hearing them. For the front office, they were the conclusion of a process that had been running for weeks. Numbers analyzed, matchup data reviewed, October projections stress-tested against every possible scenario. Clean. Logical. Defensible. For the players sitting in that clubhouse, the names landed like something physical. Because one of those names belonged to a man who had restructured his mechanics, rebuilt his delivery, and dragged himself back from the kind of injury history that ends careers, not pauses them, ends them, to become one of the most dominant starting pitchers in the National League. Tyler Glasnow had done everything they asked. And now they were telling him it wasn't enough. Walk back 3 months. Walk back to the version of Tyler Glasnow who arrived at spring training with something to prove and the physical tools to prove it. The velocity was back. The curveball was back. The presence on the mound, that particular quality that great pitchers carry into a stadium before they even throw a single pitch, was back in a way that made the people watching him in those early sessions go quiet in the way people go quiet when they are watching something rare. He had given them everything. Start by start, inning by inning, pitch by pitch, he had done exactly what a pitcher does when he wants to make a decision impossible. He had made himself undeniable. And yet here was Roberts, standing in front of his staff, with Glasnow's name on the wrong side of the list. When Glasnow found out, he didn't explode. He didn't go silent either. He did something that people who know him well said was more characteristic than either of those responses. He asked for an explanation. Directly. Formally. In the kind of tone that made it very clear this was not a request that was going to be satisfied with organizational language and carefully constructed talking points. He wanted the truth. And the truth, when it came, was not about his performance. It was about the bigger picture. The October structure. The specific configuration that Roberts and the front office had decided gave the Dodgers the best chance of winning when the games that actually defined franchises were finally played. Glasnow heard it. He processed it. And then he said what he said. I've earned my spot. Everyone in this building knows I've earned my spot. It was not a tantrum. It was a statement of fact delivered by a man who believed it completely. And the difficulty, the thing that made the room so uncomfortable after he said it, was that nobody in that room could honestly argue that he was wrong. Roki Sasaki's response was nothing like Glasnow's. Where Glasnow was controlled fire, Sasaki was something quieter and in some ways more difficult to watch. People who were present described it in different ways afterward. Some said he seemed shocked. Others said he seemed like a person who had been preparing himself for bad news without ever truly believing it would arrive. When it arrived, something gave way. He didn't make a scene. He didn't raise his voice. He sat for a long moment with his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the room, somewhere that the people around him couldn't follow. And then, when he finally spoke, what he said was not what anyone expected. He made a demand. Not an aggressive demand. Not an ultimatum delivered with anger behind it. A demand made through tears, in a voice that had lost all of its professional composure, from a young pitcher who had traveled further than most people in that room could fully comprehend to be standing where he was standing. He wanted to know, plainly and directly, whether the organization still believed in him. Not in the version of him that existed in projections and matchup data and October scenario planning. In him. The person. The pitcher who had left everything he knew to come to Los Angeles and try to become something that would justify the weight of everyone's expectations. The room went very still. Roberts didn't answer immediately. The people who were there said the silence lasted longer than was comfortable. Longer than was professional. Long enough that several people in the room had to look away from Sasaki's face because looking at it had become too difficult. When Roberts finally spoke, his voice was quieter than anyone had heard it in a long time. "This isn't about belief," he said. "This has never been about belief." Whether that answer was enough, nobody in that room could say for certain. Shohei Ohtani heard about it the same way most things reach him, through the steady, controlled flow of information that moves through a major league clubhouse the way water moves through old pipes. Quietly. Everywhere. Impossible to stop once it starts. He didn't say anything right away. Ohtani has a quality that is difficult to describe to people who haven't watched him up close. It is not silence exactly. It is more like a particular kind of stillness. The stillness of a person who processes things at a different speed than the people around him. Who waits until he has fully understood something before he allows himself to respond to it. He waited. And then he said something that nobody expected him to say publicly. Something that broke through the careful, professional composure that he maintains in front of microphones with the same consistency that he maintains his mechanics on the mound. "It's crazy," he said. "Is the front office serious?" 4 seconds of silence followed those words. Because Ohtani doesn't say things like that. Ohtani doesn't break the unwritten rule. Ohtani is the person who makes the organizational decision easier to accept simply by accepting it himself, by trusting the process, by trusting the people, by projecting the kind of quiet confidence in the Dodgers' judgment that filters down through the entire roster. And now he was standing in front of a microphone questioning that judgment out loud. The reporters in the room leaned forward almost in unison. What Ohtani was exposing was not a betrayal. He was careful about that. He was precise about it in the way that he is precise about everything, choosing his words with the same deliberateness that he chooses his pitch sequences. He was not saying that Roberts had made the wrong call. He was not standing in solidarity with Glasnow's protest or Sasaki's tearful demand. He was saying something more uncomfortable than any of that. He was saying that the decision had revealed something about the way this organization operates. Something that had always been there but had never been stated this clearly. This publicly. This undeniably. The Dodgers make decisions without sentiment. That sounds like a compliment. In front office circles, it is a compliment. It is what separates championship organizations from the ones that make the emotionally satisfying choice instead of the winning choice. It is what allows you to look at a pitcher who has done everything right and still move him to a different position on the list because the algorithm says the configuration works better without him in that slot. It is ruthless in the most technical sense of that word. Without Ruth. Without the softness that makes hard things easier to absorb. And Ohtani had just told the world that even he, the highest paid player in the history of professional sports, the man this franchise had constructed its entire identity around, was not immune to what that ruthlessness felt like when it was directed at people he respected. "It's crazy," he had said. And what he meant was, "I understand why they did it. And it's still crazy." Roberts held his press conference in the early evening. The room was fuller than usual. Word had traveled fast about Glasnow's statement, about what had happened with Sasaki, about what Ohtani had said into a microphone at a moment when he clearly hadn't fully decided whether to say it or not. Roberts walked in and sat down and placed both hands flat on the table in front of him. He looked like a man who had thought through every question that was coming and had prepared an honest answer for each one. The first question came immediately. "How do you respond to Tyler Glasnow's statement that he's earned his spot?" Roberts nodded slowly. He didn't look away. He didn't reach for organizational language or deflect with a compliment about Glasnow's professionalism. "He has earned his spot," Roberts said. "That's not what this decision was about." "Then what was it about?" Roberts took a slow breath. He looked at the table for a moment. When he looked back up, his voice was very clear and very deliberate. "It was about what gives us the best chance to win in October. Not today. Not next week. October. And sometimes the most honest thing I can do for a player is make a hard decision now so he's in the right position when it matters most." The room was quiet. "Does that make it easier for them?" a reporter asked. Roberts shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "It doesn't. And I'm not pretending it does." Somewhere on the other side of that stadium, Tyler Glasnow was in the weight room. Not because he had a session scheduled. Because he needed somewhere to put what he was feeling, and the weight room was the only place in a professional baseball facility where that kind of feeling has an appropriate outlet. Roki Sasaki had gone quiet. Not the quiet of acceptance. The quiet of a young man sitting alone with a question that hadn't been fully answered, turning it over slowly, trying to find the angle from which it made sense. And Shohei Ohtani was standing near his locker, looking at his phone, rereading something on the screen with an expression that nobody in the room could fully interpret. The Dodgers had announced the 13 strongest pitchers in their organization. They had made 2 ruthless decisions. And in doing so, they had revealed something about themselves that even their most celebrated player had felt compelled to speak about out loud. The front office was serious. They had always been serious. That was exactly what made it crazy.